The Vraxian war fleet drifted through the cold void of space, a vast armada of destruction. Over 200 warships, each bristling with weapons and shields strong enough to crush entire civilizations, hovered in perfect formation. Their massive dreadnought, the unyielding Wrath, sat at the heart of the fleet. A fortress of metal, its cannons capable of reducing planets to dust. Admiral Kavar stood tall on the bridge, his blue-gray exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial lights. His species, the Vraxians, had conquered over 30 star systems, wiping out lesser civilizations that dared resist. He had spent decades spreading their empire, crushing primitive and advanced races alike, and he had no intention of stopping. Now they faced their newest conquest, the Sol system, humanity. A minor species, barely scratching at the edges of interstellar travel. They had no empire, no colonies worth mentioning. Their technology was outdated, their ships slow and fragile. There was no need for diplomacy, no need for negotiation. Humanity would surrender, or they would burn. Kavar turned to his second-in-command, Captain Threx. "Report." Threx bowed his head. "Their defenses are laughable, Admiral. Scattered orbital platforms, a handful of outdated warships, and one anomaly." Kavar narrowed his reptilian eyes. "An anomaly?" Threx hesitated. "A single human warship, sir. Large, but alone. It came from outside the system and is currently on an intercept course. They've sent no transmissions, no demands, just a single ship coming straight at us." Kavar let out a hissing chuckle. "They must be suicidal. What is its classification?" Threx tapped his console. The holographic display shifted to show the human warship. It was an ugly, blocky thing, painted jet black with no identifying markers. Unlike Vraxian vessels, which were sleek and insectoid, this ship looked brutal, functional, designed for war rather than beauty. Its heat signature was unusual, running far hotter than expected. "No official records, Admiral," Threx admitted. "It doesn't match anything in their fleet registry. The closest comparison is their outdated dreadnought class. But this one is different. Our sensors can't penetrate its hull." Kavar scoffed. "It's one ship. What could they possibly hope to accomplish?" The bridge crew laughed. A single human vessel against the might of the Vraxian war machine? It was laughable. Yet, as they watched, the lone human warship continued its silent approach. No transmissions, no response to hails. Just relentless, unwavering movement toward the fleet. Kavar waved a hand dismissively. "Destroy it." Threx relayed the command. 3 Vraxian cruisers broke formation, their plasma lances charging with destructive energy. The lead ship, the Vengeance Blade, fired first. A lance of superheated plasma streaked through the void, slamming into the human warship. Nothing happened. The plasma seemed to splash against some kind of invisible barrier, dispersing harmlessly. A ripple of unease spread through the bridge. "Their shields absorbed it?" Threx muttered. Kavar frowned. "Fire again. All 3 ships." The cruisers obeyed. Plasma and missile fire erupted from their hulls, streaking toward the lone vessel. Explosions blossomed against its surface, filling the void with fire and light. But when the smoke cleared, the human warship remained unscathed. Not a scratch. Kavar's amusement turned to irritation. "What is the meaning of this?" Threx's hands trembled over his console. "Admiral, this is impossible. No known shielding can withstand that level of firepower. Their ship isn't just deflecting the energy, it's consuming it." The realization hit them all at once. The human ship wasn't just enduring their attacks, it was feeding off them. Then, for the first time, the warship responded. Its engines flared with an unnatural, blinding glow. It moved, not in the slow, calculated way of conventional starships, but with an unnatural, predatory speed. In a blink, it closed the distance between itself and the vengeance blade. And then it fired. A single, thin beam of crimson light lanced out from the human ship's hull, striking the Vraxian cruiser dead center. The vengeance blade didn't explode. It didn't break apart. It vanished. One moment, the ship was there. The next, a gaping hole of nothingness remained, a void of absolute darkness, as if the ship had been erased from existence. The bridge of the unyielding wrath fell into stunned silence. Kavar's blood ran cold. What kind of weapon was that? Threx's voice was barely a whisper. Sir, it didn't destroy that ship. It erased it from reality. Panic rippled through the Vraxian fleet. The remaining 2 cruisers desperately tried to flee, their engines burning white-hot. The human warship didn't let them. It moved like a predator among prey, its dark hull barely visible against the void. It fired twice more, and both cruisers suffered the same fate, erased in an instant, wiped from existence as if they had never been. Kavar clenched his mandibles. This was no ordinary human vessel. This was something else. And then, for the first time, the warship spoke. A transmission crackled to life across all Vraxian channels. The voice was deep, synthetic, emotionless. You have trespassed into human space. You have attacked unprovoked. This is your only warning. The fleet was paralyzed. No one had ever heard a human speak with such unwavering authority. No fear, no hesitation, just cold certainty. Kavar slammed his fist against his chair. All ships, fire everything, destroy that abomination. The fleet obeyed. Hundreds of plasma lances, torpedoes, and kinetic rounds tore through the void. It was enough firepower to crack a planet in half. And yet, the human ship stood unharmed. Then, it moved again, straight toward the unyielding wrath, a single human warship against the might of an entire armada. They had thought it was no threat. They were wrong. Kavar's mandibles twitched as sheer disbelief spread through his body. This wasn't how battles were supposed to go. The Vraxian fleet had conquered dozens of civilizations, reducing proud empires to rubble in mere days. No species had ever stood against them, let alone a single warship. Yet here it was. This human vessel, this thing, wiping his ships from existence like they were nothing. The alarms on the unyielding wrath blared. "Admiral! The enemy ship is closing in!" Threx's voice was shrill, his usual discipline cracking. "Redirect all power to shields!" Kavar roared. "We are the unyielding wrath! We do not fall!" The bridge crew scrambled, feeding every ounce of available energy into the dreadnought's formidable defenses. The ship's shields crackled with raw power, layers upon layers of energy interwoven into an impenetrable wall. No weapon had ever breached them. Outside, the black human warship remained eerily silent. No additional transmissions, no signs of communication. Just that slow, deliberate movement, like a predator savoring the moment before the kill. Then, without warning, it accelerated. The human ship vanished from its previous position, closing the distance in an instant. It reappeared directly in front of the dreadnought, so close that the bridge crew could see its surface in chilling detail. There were no markings, no windows, no external weapons visible. And yet it looked alive. The hull shifted subtly, its matte black exterior absorbing the surrounding light. Something about it was wrong, unnatural. Kavar's blood turned to ice. "Fire! Everything!" The dreadnought's weapons roared to life, unleashing a storm of destruction. Plasma cannons, hyper-accelerated railguns, missile swarms, all of it rained down upon the lone warship in a continuous, merciless barrage. The space around the human ship became an inferno of energy, the sheer force of the assault enough to warp local gravity. For several long seconds, it was engulfed in chaos, lost beneath the overwhelming firepower of the Vraxian flagship. Kavar exhaled sharply, gripping the armrest of his command throne. Then the smoke cleared. The human warship remained, untouched. A cold silence settled over the bridge. Threx took a step back. Impossible! The crew murmured in hushed, terrified tones. The Vraxians did not fear battle. They relished it. Yet now, for the first time in his career, Kavar saw something on his bridge he had never seen before. True, unfiltered panic. Then, without warning, the ship spoke again. Your shields will not protect you. The moment the words finished, something horrifying happened. The dreadnought's shields, its greatest defense, its impenetrable wall of energy, collapsed in an instant. Not overloaded, not breached, simply gone. The ship's energy systems flickered violently. Consoles sparked. Crew members stumbled back from their stations. Kavar's eyes widened in shock. What did they do? Threx frantically scanned his console. I don't know. It wasn't an EMP. It wasn't a weapon. It was like the shield just ceased to exist. The lights dimmed. For the first time since the battle began, the human ship revealed its weapon. A soft hum resonated through space. A single point of crimson light flared to life on the front of the ship. The same weapon that had erased 3 of his cruisers. Kavar gripped the arms of his throne. His mind raced for a solution, a strategy, anything. But deep down, he knew. There was no defense, no escape, no chance. He had made a fatal mistake. He had underestimated humanity. The bridge of the unyielding wrath was deathly silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The crimson light at the front of the human warship burned brighter, pulsing like the heartbeat of a god staring down at an insect. Admiral Kavar's mind was a storm of calculations and survival instincts. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to act, to do something. But what could he do? His dreadnought, the most powerful warship in the Vraxian fleet, was defenseless. His shields had vanished like mist in the wind. His weapons had done nothing, and the human ship, it had barely even tried. Kavar turned to Threx, who stood frozen in place, his eyes locked on the enemy vessel like a prey animal paralyzed before its predator. Prepare the fleet for full retreat, Kavar ordered, his voice a low, controlled growl. We will not die here. Threx blinked, snapping out of his daze. Admiral, retreat! Do it! Kavar roared. Now! Threx flinched, then rushed to send the command. Across the fleet, the surviving Vraxian warships scrambled into motion. Their engines roared to life, emergency warp drives charging at full capacity. It was chaos. Captains frantically rerouting power, crew members panicking as they realized the unthinkable. They were losing. The Vraxians had never retreated from battle before. They had never needed to. But now, the only choice was flight or annihilation. But the human ship wasn't going to let them go so easily. You were warned, the voice from the ship declared. The crimson light pulsed once, and then it fired. The beam cut through space like a divine judgment. It wasn't just a weapon. It was something more, something terrifying. It struck the nearest Vraxian battleship. The Iron Fang, and just like before, the ship didn't explode. It didn't break apart. It simply ceased to be. One moment it was there, the next gone. The void where it had been was eerily silent, a patch of nothingness where reality itself seemed to reject the ship's existence. The fleet's comm channels erupted in terrified voices. Captains screamed, officers shouted contradictory orders. Some ships fired in desperation, others broke formation and ran without command. It didn't matter. The human ship moved again. Kavar's claws dug into the armrest of his throne as he watched the impossible unfold. The warship danced through the battlefield like a phantom, appearing and disappearing in flashes of unnatural speed. With each pulse of its crimson light, another Vraxian ship vanished. One after another. Gone. It wasn't war anymore. It was a massacre. Kavar's own vessel trembled as the surrounding space was stripped of his fleet. The sheer efficiency of the slaughter made his exoskeleton crawl. And then, suddenly, the human ship stopped. The black void of its hull faced the unyielding wrath directly. Kavar could feel it watching him. The voice returned, calm and absolute. Admiral Kavar of the Vraxian Empire. His blood froze. Your empire has declared war against humanity. You have attacked unprovoked. Your actions have consequences. Kavar swallowed. His throat was dry, his hands trembling. We surrender. The bridge crew turned to him in shock. Vraxians did not surrender. They fought to the last breath. They burned their enemies, and if they were to fall, they took their foes with them. That was their way. That was their honor. But honor meant nothing in the face of absolute annihilation. Kavar stepped forward, gripping the control panel with shaking hands. He took a deep breath, suppressing the shame that burned inside him. "We were wrong," he said, forcing the words out. "We underestimated you. Please, let us leave." Silence. For a moment, Kavar thought, hoped, that the human ship would accept their surrender. Then the voice came one final time. "There is no surrender." The crimson light flared. Kavar closed his eyes. Kavar braced himself for oblivion. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be helpless. The crimson light flared, the hum of the weapon vibrating through his bones. His entire existence, his empire, his conquests, his legacy, was about to be erased in a flash of human wrath. But then, nothing. The energy surge from the human warship faded. The crimson glow dimmed. The bridge of the unyielding wrath was silent except for the ragged breathing of terrified officers. Kavar's eyes snapped open. He was alive. What happened?" he whispered. Threx, his face still twisted in fear, hesitated before answering. The human ship, it stopped. On the view screen, the void black warship remained motionless. It was watching them. The same synthetic voice returned, now impossibly calm. "We do not kill for sport." The words sent a cold shiver through Kavar's spine. That single sentence carried an implication more terrifying than any weapon. It meant that this massacre hadn't even been personal. The humans had wiped out half the fleet as easily as a god crushing insects underfoot. Not out of anger, not out of vengeance, simply because they could. Kavar's throat was dry. His mandibles trembled as he spoke. Then what do you want?" Another pause. Then the voice answered. "You came to conquer. Now you will carry our message instead." Kavar stiffened. "Message? Return to your empire. Tell them what happened here. Tell them humanity is not to be provoked. Tell them what happens when they send fleets into our territory." Kavar clenched his fists. He had never been humiliated like this, never been allowed to live after defeat. It was almost worse than death. The bridge crew stared at him, waiting for his response. He could order one final suicidal attack. He could try to restore his honor, go down fighting. But what would that change? He had seen what the human warship could do. If he attacked, he would die, and no one would know what happened here. If he lived, the Vraxian Empire would know the truth. That was the real punishment, not death, but fear. Kavar swallowed his pride. "We will leave. Now?" The human ship didn't respond, but the path before them opened. For the first time, their navigation systems unlocked. The strange energy that had prevented their warp drives from engaging was gone. Kavar turned to Threx. "Order all surviving ships to retreat. We're returning home." Threx nodded hurriedly, sending the command. Within minutes, the remaining Vraxian ships, barely a fraction of the fleet they had arrived with, engaged their warp drives, blinking out of the system one by one. Kavar was the last to leave. As the countdown for the jump began, he cast one final look at the human warship. It hadn't moved, hadn't pursued. It simply lingered, like a silent guardian watching its prey scurry away in terror. Kavar gritted his teeth. This is not over. The moment they returned to Vraxian space, he would report this to the High Council. They would gather intelligence. They would learn what humanity truly was. And next time, they would be ready. Or so he thought. As the warp drive engaged and the dreadnought shot into hyperspace, a final transmission whispered through the ship's systems. Not a threat, not a warning. Just 2 words. You won't. The warp tunnel twisted and shimmered around the unyielding Wrath as it raced through hyperspace, retreating from the nightmare it had just faced. The dreadnought's once mighty fleet had been shattered, reduced to a handful of survivors fleeing in disgrace. Admiral Kavar sat in his command throne, his claws tapping against the armrest in a slow, methodical rhythm. His mind was a battlefield of conflicting thoughts. He had been victorious in every campaign, had crushed countless enemies beneath the might of the Vraxian Empire. But now he was running from a single human warship. The shame was unbearable. "Admiral," Threx said hesitantly, his voice quiet. "The crew, they are uneasy." Kavar let out a slow breath. Uneasy was an understatement. The moment they had entered warp, the entire ship had fallen into a stunned, horrified silence. Vraxians were warriors. They did not fear battle, did not flinch in the face of death. And yet, the bridge officers, the soldiers, even the lowest technicians had all seen the same thing. A lone human vessel had stripped them of their power, their control, their existence, like an apex predator deciding whether or not to finish its meal. Kavar turned to his second-in-command. "How many of our ships made it?" Threx hesitated before answering. "Of the 217 warships that entered the Sol system, 23 remain." A muscle in Kavar's jaw twitched. 23. Less than 1/10 of their forces had survived. And the humans? They had lost nothing. He clenched his fist, exhaling sharply. "The High Council will demand answers." Threx nodded. "Yes, Admiral. But they will not believe us." Kavar knew he was right. The Vraxian Empire had ruled through strength, through sheer overwhelming force. The idea that a single human warship had erased their fleet, effortlessly, without suffering a scratch, was inconceivable. "The Council will think we are lying," Kavar muttered. Threx swallowed hard. "Or worse, that we are cowards." Kavar's mandibles clicked together in frustration. If the Council saw them as weak, they would be stripped of their ranks, cast into disgrace, or even executed for failing the Empire. He would not allow that to happen. "We must return with more than just words," Kavar decided. "We need proof." Threx's head tilted slightly. "Proof, sir." Kavar leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with determination. "Our ship recorded everything. The battle, the destruction of our fleet, the human weaponry. If we present undeniable evidence to the Council, they will have no choice but to listen." Threx hesitated. "You wish to warn them?" Kavar's voice was low, filled with barely contained rage. "I wish to destroy them." The bridge crew tensed at his words. Even after witnessing humanity's power, the fire of vengeance still burned in their admiral's chest. We will study their technology. We will adapt, Kavar continued. We will find a way to counter their weapons. Humanity has proven itself to be the greatest threat we have ever faced, which means they must be eliminated before they can strike again. Threx nodded, though his unease remained. And if the High Council refuses? Kavar's expression darkened. Then we will make them understand. A chime echoed through the bridge. Admiral, we are exiting hyperspace, a crew member announced. Kavar straightened in his throne, preparing himself for the storm that was about to come. The viewport shimmered as the swirling lights of hyperspace collapsed into normal space. Before them, the crimson jewel of the Vraxian Empire hung in the void. Vraxia Prime, their homeworld. Massive orbital stations hovered in place, protecting the capital world with layer upon layer of warships. Towering spires of metal and fire stretched across the planet's surface, a civilization built upon centuries of conquest. And yet, as the unyielding wrath approached, Kavar felt something was wrong. Why are they not hailing us? Threx muttered. The fleet should have been met with immediate transmissions, questions, demands. Yet there was only silence. Scan the system, Kavar ordered, his gut twisting. A moment later, a horrified gasp echoed from one of the bridge officers. Sir, we are detecting anomalies across the planet. Kavar's blood ran cold. What kind of anomalies? The officer's mandibles trembled. Gravitational distortions, radiation signatures we do not recognize, and missing sections of the planet's surface. Kavar's heart pounded in his chest. Missing? The officer's voice dropped to a whisper, as if they were erased. Kavar shot to his feet, his eyes wide in disbelief. He turned back to the viewport, and then he saw it. The black warship. It hung above Vraxia Prime like a phantom, waiting, watching, waiting for them. Kavar's breath caught in his throat. No, that's impossible. Threx was shaking. How did they? Then, for the first time, an incoming transmission crackled through the bridge. You thought we would let you run. The human warship's voice was calm, controlled, inevitable. You were wrong. The crimson glow flared to life once more. Kavar screamed. Kavar's mind reeled. The human warship had beaten them back, had shattered their fleet, had given them a single chance to retreat. And yet, here it was, waiting, at their homeworld. He gripped the edges of his command throne, his claws digging into the metal. His breath came fast and shallow. How? He whispered. How did they get here before us? Threx looked equally horrified. They followed us. No, not followed. Anticipated us. Kavar's mandibles clicked together. Impossible. Impossible. No ship could track a fleet through hyperspace. No ship could arrive before one. Warp travel was instantaneous over vast distances, yes, but it was still predictable. The mathematics of arrival were absolute. Unless... Admiral, one of the bridge officers stammered. Our systems are picking up localized time distortions. The words sent ice through Kavar's veins. Localized time distortions. They hadn't just been followed. The human warship had bent time itself to reach Vraxia Prime first. A slow, awful realization settled over Kavar. They were not dealing with technology as they understood it. This wasn't just superior firepower. This wasn't just a more advanced enemy. This was something beyond them. Sir, Threx whispered, eyes glued to the viewport. The homeworld. Kavar turned to look, and his heart stopped. Vraxia Prime was wounded. Sections of the planet's surface were simply gone. Whole cities, entire landscapes, erased as if they had never existed. Not burned, not bombarded, just missing. It was as if reality itself had been rewritten. No, Kavar muttered. His claws trembled against his throne. This isn't possible. This isn't war. The bridge crew sat in stunned silence. Even the war-hardened officers, Vraxians who had conquered entire species, who had never feared anything, were silent. Because this was no longer a battle. This was judgment. Then the human voice returned, its tone cold and unfeeling. You were warned. Kavar snapped his gaze to the black warship, his desperation rising. We retreated, he snarled. We obeyed your demand. Why have you come here? The reply was immediate. Because your empire will seek revenge, because your leaders will not accept defeat, because left alone, your kind will return. Kavar's breath hitched. This war is over. Your species does not get a second chance. The crimson glow flared once more, and then it fired. The beam of red light streaked through the void, slamming into the planetary defense grid with effortless precision. Shields, which had been impenetrable for centuries, collapsed in an instant, vanishing as though they had never existed. The planetary defense cannons, built to shatter enemy fleets, fired in desperation. But the moment their energy bolts reached the human ship, they simply ceased. The attacks were erased from existence before they could even land. The black warship didn't move. It didn't need to. Kavar's claws trembled against the armrest of his throne. We need to do something. But there was nothing left to do. He had seen this before. His fleet had fired everything they had at the human ship. Their most powerful weapons, their strongest defenses. None of it had mattered. And now, the unyielding wrath was just another speck of dust before a storm. The bridge was a cacophony of panicked voices, officers screaming for orders, crew members scrambling at their consoles, the dreadnought's weapons primed, targeting the human ship. Futile. The crimson light pulsed again, and the unyielding wrath ceased to exist. Kavar did not feel death. There was no explosion, no pain. One moment he was in his command throne, surrounded by his officers. The next, he was alone. A void stretched around him, endless and black. No sound, no stars, just nothing. He looked down. He had no body. He was, and yet, he wasn't. What? His voice cracked, the words feeling distant. Then, the voice returned. The human voice, but now it was different. No longer synthetic, no longer cold. Now it was something far more terrifying. It was human, real, calm, understanding. This is the consequence of your actions. Kavar tried to move. He could not. Where? What is this? This is what remains. Panic clawed at his mind. What did you do? The voice was quiet. We erased what was hostile. His mind whirled. He tried to picture Vraxia Prime, his empire, his fleet, but the images were fading, like they had never been there at all. No, Kavar gritted his teeth. You can't just erase an entire species. You can't just end an empire like it was never. The voice interrupted. You misunderstand. Silence. Then, your empire was already gone the moment it declared war on us. Kavar felt himself unraveling, his thoughts, his memories, drifting, slipping away into the nothingness. His mind fought against it. He refused to accept it. He was Admiral Kavar. He was a warrior, a conqueror, a ruler of the stars. And yet, even as he struggled, his very identity was fading. His name, his purpose, his existence. Gone. The universe did not mourn the loss of the Vraxian Empire. No great war was recorded in the history of the stars. No tales were told of a mighty civilization that once ruled vast systems. There were no ruins left behind, no wreckage, because there had never been a Vraxian Empire. There had only ever been a brief, forgotten moment, when a fleet entered human space. And then, there was nothing. Somewhere in the vast, infinite black of the universe, something stirred. It was not life, Not thought, not even a presence, just a whisper, a fleeting, fading echo of something that had once been Admiral Kavar, a name without a body, a memory without a mind, something that should no longer exist. Yet, in the abyss, there was still awareness. Kavar did not know how long he had been here. He did not know where here was. He only knew that he was alone, and that he was fading. Panic clawed at him, not in a physical sense, for he had no body, but in the deep, instinctual way that a dying creature struggled to hold on to its last breath. The Empire, his people, his home world. All of it was gone, not destroyed, not conquered, erased. And yet, something remained. A fragment, a sliver of consciousness drifting in a void where time had no meaning. For an eternity, or maybe a mere instant, there was nothing. Then it returned. The voice. You should not be. The presence of it was overwhelming. It wasn't loud, yet it filled everything. It had no face, no form, yet Kavar could feel it, watching. Where am I? Kavar's voice trembled. Nowhere. A silence. Then the voice spoke again, its tone softer this time. And yet you remain. Kavar felt something he had not felt in a long, long time. Hope. I remain? He latched onto the words like a drowning man grasping for air. An error, a fracture in the process. You were meant to be gone. Kavar's thoughts swirled. A fracture? A mistake? His entire species had been erased, removed so completely that the universe itself had rewritten history to forget them. And yet, something had failed. Something had left him behind. He did not know if it was luck, or fate, or the cruelest form of punishment. But he knew one thing. He was still here, and that meant there was still a chance. Kavar steadied himself. He did not have a body, but his will hardened all the same. What are you? He asked. A machine? A god? A human? The voice was silent for a long time. Then, at last, it answered. We are human. The word sent a cold shiver through Kavar's fading consciousness. This was no mere species, no civilization of flesh and blood. This was something more, something greater. Kavar had thought the Vraxians were the dominant force in the galaxy, that they were the apex predators of the stars, that no race could rival their might. He had been wrong. The humans were not conquerors. They were not warriors. They were editors of reality itself, and they had decided the Vraxian Empire no longer belonged in their universe. Kavar gritted his teeth. Why? Another pause. Because we do not tolerate threats. Anger flared inside him. You think yourselves gods? The voice did not rise. It did not argue. It simply stated a fact. We do not think. We simply are. Kavar clenched what little of himself remained. Then why am I still here? Because we are not perfect. The voice sounded almost thoughtful, as if considering something, as if deciding. Then a shift, a tremor in the nothingness. A choice had been made. You will be given a second existence. Kavar felt a pull, something grasping at him, pulling his awareness forward. Not death, something else, something new. The voice spoke one final time. Learn, evolve, understand. And then the void collapsed. Kavar awoke, not in the black abyss, not in the empty nothingness where he had lingered for what felt like eternity. He awoke on solid ground. He could feel again. His limbs were weak, his vision blurred, his exoskeleton, his body was intact, but different, lighter, stronger, altered. His surroundings were unfamiliar, not Vraxian, not human, somewhere else, somewhere new. His mind was intact, his memories intact, but something else was inside him now, a knowledge, a whisper of something greater. Kavar stood, his legs unsteady, his claws flexing, and then he heard the voice one last time, but this time it wasn't distant. It was inside him. Begin again. Kavar staggered forward, his body unfamiliar, yet his own. His limbs responded with precision, but there was an unnatural smoothness to every movement, a lightness that had not existed before. His exoskeleton, once thick and cumbersome, was sleeker, stronger. His senses were sharper, clearer, and his mind was different. There was something inside him now, woven into the very fabric of his thoughts, a presence, a whisper of knowledge far beyond what any Vraxian had ever possessed. Not human, not Vraxian, something else. He took a slow, cautious breath, then forced himself to focus. The world around him was vast and pristine, unlike anything he had ever seen. Towering structures of sleek black metal stretched toward a sky filled with distant stars. The air was crisp, untainted by pollution or war. The ground beneath him was smooth, seamless, as if the very planet had been designed. And he was alone. He turned, scanning the horizon. No sign of other life, no sound, just the quiet hum of something unseen, vibrating in the very air. Kavar clenched his fists. "Where am I?" he demanded. The voice returned, but this time it was not distant. This time it came from within. "You are where you need to be." Kavar's mandibles tightened. "Enough riddles." A pause. Then, the voice replied, "You were meant to be erased, but you remain. This was unexpected, unplanned, an anomaly." Kavar's breath caught. The humans had intended to wipe him out, just like the rest of his empire, just like everything he had ever known. But something had failed. A mistake. He should have been nothing. And yet here he stood. He exhaled slowly. "So what now? Now you evolve?" Kavar's eyes narrowed. "What have you done to me?" Another pause. Then the truth. "You are no longer Vraxian, no longer bound by what you were. You are something more, something new." Kavar's mind swirled with rage. "You changed me? We freed you!" The words hit him like a strike to the chest. Freed? Freed? The Vraxian Empire had ruled through dominance, through strength. He had spent his life conquering, crushing, bending the weak to his will. That was the way of his people. But there were no more Vraxians, no more empire, only him. And he was no longer what he once was. Slowly, hesitantly, he focused inward. He felt the changes in his body, felt something else woven into his very being. It was knowledge, understanding, the whispers of something far greater than war. He saw flashes of information that no Vraxian had ever possessed. Physics beyond anything his species had dreamed of. Weapons that did not destroy, but unmade. Technologies that did not conquer but controlled reality itself. And at the center of it all, humanity. Kavar shuddered. "What are you?" The voice answered with the cold, unwavering certainty that had haunted him since the battle began. "We are what remains when war is no longer necessary." Kavar felt his legs weaken. The humans. They had moved past war, not through peace, not through diplomacy, but through something else entirely. They no longer fought their enemies. They simply removed them from existence. And now they had done something even more terrifying. They had taken a conqueror and remade him. Kavar's breathing was unsteady. His claws curled and uncurled. He had always believed power was the ultimate truth. That strength was what dictated who ruled and who fell. But now he understood. The greatest power was not in destruction. It was in erasure. And the humans had chosen not to erase him. They had chosen to make him understand. Kavar looked up at the endless sky, the stars stretching before him. His empire was gone. His people were dust, and he was alone. Or perhaps he was free. He took a slow step forward, then another. A path was forming beneath his feet, stretching towards something unseen. A choice lay before him. He could cling to what he was, rage against what had been taken from him, or he could step forward into what could be. Kavar closed his eyes. And then he walked. The galaxy was quiet. Too quiet. It had been 2 years since Captain Elias Grant had detonated the Excalibur warhead at the heart of the Erebus hive mind. 2 years since the unstoppable swarm had collapsed in an instant, their monstrous forms vanishing into nothingness. 2 years since the last remnants of the Alliance had drifted in the aftermath of a victory that had cost them everything. And yet, the silence felt unnatural. High Captain Zorth stood aboard the bridge of the Sovereign Wrath, gazing out at the vastness of deep space. The last battle had been fought in a region beyond the known galaxy, a place where the Erebus had gathered their strength, where physics itself had seemed to unravel. Now, all that remained was a dead zone, an empty abyss where the laws of reality still bent in ways they shouldn't. The war was over. So why did it still feel like something was watching? High Captain. Zorth turned, his second-in-command, Warlord Threx, standing rigid beside him. The scars of battle still marred his scaled skin, a reminder of the horrors they had barely survived. "What is it?" Zorth asked. Threx hesitated. "Sensors are detecting anomalies at the edge of the dead zone. It's strange." Zorth's spines stiffened. "Define strange." Threx tapped the console, and the holographic display shimmered to life. "We sent long-range probes into the Excalibur detonation zone last month. None of them returned. But today, one of them did." Zorth frowned. "And?" Threx zoomed in on the probe's final transmissions. Static filled the screen, distorted readings flashing in erratic patterns. Then, for a brief moment, something appeared. A ripple in the darkness, a brief flicker of an unknown energy signature. Then the probe was gone. No explosion, no interference. It had simply vanished. Zorth clenched his jaw. "Play it again." Threx obeyed, but the results didn't change. The anomaly lasted no more than 3 seconds. A disturbance. Something shifting in the dark. It was impossible. The Erebus were dead. Their source had been erased, hadn't it? Zorth exhaled, turning away from the screen. "Have there been any other reports like this?" Threx hesitated again. "Yes." Zorth's claws curled. "How many?" "A dozen. All from the farthest reaches of space. Ships disappearing. Distorted sensor readings. Whispers in comm channels." Zorth's blood turned cold. "Whispers?" Threx nodded grimly. "Voices, patterns that don't match any known language, and in some cases, recognizable transmissions. Distorted, but—" He swallowed. "Some of them sound human." Zorth turned fully to face him, his stomach twisting. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Threx's expression was dark. "We thought the Erebus were impossible once, too." A long silence stretched between them. Zorth turned back toward the viewport, staring into the abyss. He had fought the Erebus, seen what they could do, and he had seen them die, but now something new had taken their place. Something was moving in the darkness. And it was calling them back. The war was supposed to be over. Humanity had burned its homeworld to stop the Erebus. The last remnants of the Galactic Alliance had fled to the edges of known space, broken but alive. The Excalibur warhead had done what nothing else could. It had erased the enemy from existence. And yet something remained, something wrong. High Captain Zorth paced the command deck of the Sovereign Wrath, his claws tapping against the cold metal floor. The reports from Threx still lingered in his mind. Whispers in dead channels, missing ships, anomalies at the very edge of the Excalibur detonation zone. It didn't make sense. The Erebus were gone. They had to be gone. "Hi, Captain," a voice called from the sensor pit. Zorth turned, his spines stiffening. "Report." The technician's fingers danced across the console. "We've received another transmission. It's faint, but it's coming from inside the dead zone." Zorth strode toward the console, staring at the screen. The data was garbled, distorted beyond recognition. But as the technician cleaned up the signal, something resolved from the static. A voice. Faint, broken but unmistakable. "Help." Zorth's breath caught in his throat. The bridge crew went silent. Threx's expression darkened. "Run it through analysis. If this is some kind of residual transmission from the war, I want to know." The technician worked quickly, filtering out the distortions. The voice sharpened. Zorth's stomach twisted into knots. It was human. "This is Captain Elias Grant. I repeat, I am still here." The silence on the bridge became suffocating. Zorth's claws curled into a fist. His voice was barely above a whisper. "That's impossible." It had to be a trick. Zorth sat in the war room with his senior officers, staring at the holographic projection of the recovered signal. He had heard Grant's final words before the Excalibur warhead detonated. He had seen Indomitable's sensor feeds as the explosion consumed everything. Captain Elias Grant was dead. And yet... Zorth exhaled sharply. Could this be Erebus mimicry? One of the officers, a grizzled human named Commander Sato, shook his head. "I fought the Erebus for years. They never pretended to be us. They consumed. They took over bodies, ships, entire planets. But they never used deception. They didn't need to." Threx crossed his arms. "Then what is this?" Sato hesitated before speaking again. "I ran the voice print through every available database. It's an exact match for Grant." He leaned forward. "Exact. No errors, no inconsistencies." Zorth's spines bristled. "That's not possible. The Excalibur warhead didn't just destroy him, it erased him. That entire sector was wiped from existence." Sato held his gaze. "And yet, the signal is coming from there." A cold silence stretched across the room. Zorth clenched his jaw. He didn't believe in ghosts, but if the Erebus had taught him anything, it was that the universe held horrors beyond understanding. If this was a trap, they needed to know. And if, somehow, Elias Grant was alive, then they had left something behind in the darkness, something unfinished. Zorth exhaled, making his decision. "We're going back." The Sovereign Wrath moved through the void like a silent predator, its war-worn hull gliding past the shattered remnants of the Erebus war zone. It was not alone. A small fleet accompanied it. 30 ships, the last remnants of the once mighty Galactic Alliance. Human destroyers, Royan dreadnoughts, Tari recon vessels, and a handful of independent craft that had survived the war by sheer luck. They had all seen the horrors firsthand, and yet they had returned to the place where everything had ended. High Captain Zorth stood on the bridge, staring at the view screen. They were approaching the coordinates of the signal, the Excalibur detonation zone. Or what was left of it. The void was wrong. Even through the reinforced viewports, space itself seemed fractured. The region where the weapon had been detonated didn't look like a normal battlefield. It was emptier than it should have been, like something had eaten away at the very fabric of reality. "Hi, Captain," Threx said from his station. "We're crossing the threshold." Zorth exhaled slowly. "Status?" Threx's claws danced over the console. "Sensors are unreliable. Some readings show total emptiness. Others show—" He hesitated. "I don't know, sir. Like space is shifting around us." Zorth frowned. "What about the signal?" Sato, the human commander, checked his instruments. Still there, unchanged. Whoever or whatever is broadcasting, they're waiting. Zorth turned to his crew. Send a probe ahead. I want full scans before we take another step forward. A small drone detached from the fleet, its thrusters igniting as it raced into the anomaly. The bridge crew watched as its data feed streamed in. For a moment, everything seemed fine. Then the screen flickered, the data corrupted. The probe's signal twisted into unreadable gibberish, until it was replaced by something else. A voice, a whisper, laced with static and distortion. I told you, I'm still here. Zorth felt his blood turn cold. It was Elias Grant, and he was waiting for them in the darkness. The bridge of the Sovereign Wrath was dead silent. The probe's feed had cut out completely, leaving nothing but static. Yet, the voice lingered in their ears, crackling across the comms. It was unmistakably Elias Grant's voice, calm, controlled, the same tone he had used in every battle before Earth was lost. But that was impossible. He was dead. Zorth's claws clenched behind his back. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, that they were walking into something they couldn't comprehend. And yet, if there was even a chance that Grant was alive, they had to know. Threx, Zorth said, forcing his voice to remain steady. Can you pinpoint the source? Threx shook his head. Not exactly. The signal is shifting, like it's bleeding through different points in space, but it's strongest at the core of the detonation zone. Of course it was. Zorth turned to Sato. You know Grant better than any of us. What do you think? The human commander hesitated. I don't know. He rubbed his face, as if trying to shake off the weight of his thoughts. If this were anyone else, I'd say it was Erebus mimicry, but the Erebus never talked like this. And this feels like him. Zorth didn't like that answer. He turned to the view screen, watching as the abyss stretched before them. The detonation zone was no ordinary battlefield. It was an open wound, a place where the laws of physics had been scarred by the Excalibur warhead. No ship had ever returned from its depths. And yet, something was inside. Zorth exhaled sharply. We're going in. The fleet moved cautiously through the dead zone. Every ship had shields at maximum, weapons primed, but there was nothing to fight. No enemies, no wreckage, nothing at all, just emptiness. And then, a shape emerged in the distance. At first it was difficult to comprehend. The void seemed to ripple, warping around something almost tangible. The closer they got, the more it solidified, until finally the scanners locked on. Sato sucked in a sharp breath. That's a ship. Zorth narrowed his eyes. Not just a ship, the Indomitable, the massive human warship drifted silently in the abyss, its black armor still intact. No visible damage, no signs of decay. It was as if it had been frozen in time. And yet, it wasn't right. It was wrong. Even looking at it made Zorth's scales itch, like his brain was struggling to process its existence. This can't be real, Threx muttered. Zorth didn't disagree. The Indomitable had been at ground zero when Grant detonated the Excalibur warhead. It shouldn't be here. It should have been erased along with everything else. And yet here it was, waiting. The comms crackled again. I told you, I'm still here. Zorth exhaled slowly. Prepare a boarding team. The boarding shuttle drifted toward the Indomitable, its thrusters barely firing as it navigated through the unnatural stillness of the dead zone. High Captain Zorth sat strapped into his harness, his claws tapping rhythmically against his knee. The air inside the shuttle was tense, thick with unspoken fear. The Indomitable was not just a warship. It was a legend, the last guardian of Earth. the vessel that had led the charge against the Erebus and delivered the final blow. It was also supposed to be gone. And yet, it drifted before them, untouched by time. Zorth glanced at the human seated across from him, Commander Sato. The man had barely spoken since they left the Sovereign Wrath. His eyes were locked on the viewports, staring at the hulking form of the warship, as if trying to convince himself it was real. "You all right?" Zorth asked. Sato didn't look away. "I served on that ship once." His voice was low. "For 5 years, before Grant took command." Zorth tilted his head. "You knew him well?" Sato exhaled. "Well enough to know that if he is in there, it's not him anymore." The word sat heavy in the cabin. Zorth turned his gaze forward as the Indomitable grew larger in the viewport. The docking bay loomed ahead, its doors already open, as if inviting them inside. Something was waiting for them. The shuttle shuddered as it made contact with the docking clamps. A loud clank echoed through the hull, followed by a mechanical hiss as the pressurization equalized. Then, silence. Zorth unstrapped himself, standing as the boarding team prepped their weapons. 8 soldiers, 4 human, 4 Royan, each armed with plasma rifles and electromagnetic disruptors in case the Erebus had left. Remnants. "Final check," Zorth said. "No open comms unless necessary, no splitting up. If something moves, you shoot first, understood?" A chorus of acknowledgments followed. Zorth exhaled and hit the airlock release. The doors slid open with a slow, agonizing hiss. Beyond them, the Indomitable awaited. Dark, silent, waiting. The first step inside felt wrong. The boarding team's boots clanked against the metal floor, but the sound was muffled, like the ship was swallowing it. The lights were dim, flickering in slow, erratic pulses. Shadows stretched across the walls, twisting in unnatural patterns. The air was thick. Not physically, but in a way Zorth couldn't describe. Like something unseen was pressing against them, watching. Sato took the lead, his rifle raised. "Power's still on. Life support's running." Zorth nodded, gripping his own weapon tighter. "Then where's the crew?" No one answered. They moved cautiously through the corridors, sweeping every corner, but the ship remained empty. Not a single body. No blood. No signs of struggle. Just absence. It was as if the crew had simply vanished. Then the whispering started. At first it was barely noticeable, just the faintest hum, like static in the comms. But as they pressed deeper into the ship, the sound grew stronger. "Still here." Zorth froze. "Did anyone else hear that?" The team exchanged uneasy glances. Then a human soldier muttered, "Yeah." We all did. Sato's jaw clenched. "It's Grant, same as before." Zorth's spines bristled. "Number, that's not Grant. That's something wearing his voice." The whispering continued, growing more fragmented. "Don't leave me. The void is endless. I see you." Then the lights shut off. Total darkness. A click echoed as someone switched on their helmet lamp. The beam cut through the void, but the shadows seemed to cling to the walls, resisting the light. A deep, metallic groan rumbled through the ship. And then, something moved. Not in the open, not in their path, but in the walls. A slow, shifting ripple ran along the bulkheads, like muscle tensing beneath skin. The metal itself seemed to breathe. Sato's voice was tight. "That's not the ship." Zorth's claws tightened around his rifle. "Number, it's not." And then, in the pitch-black silence, a voice rang out. "Clear. Director. You shouldn't have come back." It was Elias Grant, and he was right behind them. Zorth spun, rifle raised, his claws tightening against the trigger. The boarding team followed suit, sweeping their weapons toward the source of the voice. The corridor behind them was empty. Nothing. No movement, no life signs. Just the faint hum of the Indomitable's systems, still running in the darkness. But they had all heard it. Elias Grant's voice. The air felt wrong, heavy, as if something unseen was pressing down on them, wrapping invisible hands around their throats. Zorth exhaled slowly. Thermal scans? A Royan soldier checked his visor. Negative. Nothing visible. That didn't make sense. Zorth had fought in dozens of wars. He knew the feeling of an enemy watching from the shadows. But this? This wasn't something lurking in the dark. The darkness itself felt alive. Sato gritted his teeth. We keep moving. Main bridge is 3 decks up. If we can access the logs, we might find out what the hell happened here. Zorth nodded, motioning for the team to advance. They moved carefully, stepping over rusted grates and past dead terminals. The Indomitable should have been a corpse of a ship, lifeless and abandoned, but its power still thrummed beneath their feet. It was awake, and something was awake with it. They reached the first junction when the whispering started again. This time it wasn't a voice in the comms. It was all around them. Too late. Turn back. I see you. A flicker of movement to the right. Zorth snapped his rifle toward the motion, but the corridor was empty. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. He didn't imagine that. Sato, he whispered. Did you see? A thud echoed through the hallway. Loud, directly ahead. The team froze. Weapons up. Zorth's pulse hammered as the thudding came again. A slow, deliberate impact against the bulkhead. Then, a single, bloody handprint smeared across the metal, appearing as if from nowhere. And in the dim emergency lights, something stepped into view. The team's breath hitched. It was Elias Grant, or at least something that looked like him. Zorth had seen Elias Grant before. He had fought beside him, knew the hard-set jaw, the sharp blue eyes, the unshakable posture of a man who had led his species through its darkest hour. But this thing? This wasn't Grant. It wore his face, but something was wrong. Too still. Too perfect, like a wax figure carved to look like a man. The Elias Grant thing stared at them, unblinking. Its uniform was pristine, untouched by battle. Not a single scar, not a hint of fatigue, just empty. Sato, Zorth muttered. Are you seeing this? Sato's voice was hoarse. Yeah. Zorth took a slow step forward. His claws tightened around his rifle. Grant? The thing's head tilted, a mechanical slowness, like it didn't quite understand the question. Then, in that same perfect voice, You shouldn't have come back. Zorth's spines bristled. You're not him. The thing smiled. Not a human smile. Too wide, too deliberate. Aren't I? The lights flickered, and Elias Grant vanished. The moment he disappeared, the entire ship shuddered. The bulkheads groaned like living metal twisting under pressure. The whispering turned into a roar, 1,000 voices screaming at once, and then the shadows moved. Zorth barely had time to react before something lunged from the darkness. It wasn't Grant. It wasn't anything. A shape, black, formless, shifting, poured from the walls, taking shape as it moved. Not a body, but an imitation of one. It moved like a human, but it wasn't human. Its limbs stretched too long, bending at unnatural angles. Its eyes, if they were eyes, glowed with a faint, sickly green light, and it was fast. Zorth barely ducked as it lunged. The thing's arms stretched like liquid metal, razor-sharp claws missing his face by inches. Fire! The team opened up, plasma rounds ripping through the corridor. The thing jerked, its body distorting as if struggling to hold its shape. For a brief moment it flickered, its form glitching, shifting. One second, it was a featureless nightmare. The next, it looked like one of their own soldiers. A human marine, his face twisted in agony, his body half consumed by shifting shadows. He screamed. Zorth pulled the trigger. A plasma round burned straight through its chest. The thing convulsed, its stolen features melting away, replaced by writhing black tendrils. Then, with an unnatural shriek, it collapsed into the floor, dissolving into nothingness. Silence. Zorth's breath was ragged. His claws trembled around his rifle. The air smelled wrong, like burning metal and something rotting. Sato swallowed hard. What the hell was that? Zorth forced himself to stand, forced himself to think. It had looked human. For a moment, it had even sounded human. And it had worn a face, just like the Elias Grant thing. Zorth exhaled, steadying his pulse. We need to get to the bridge. Sato wiped sweat from his brow. You think the logs will tell us what happened? Zorth looked down at the blackened remains of the thing that had tried to kill them. No, he muttered. I think they'll tell us what's still happening. And that terrified him more than anything. The air inside the Indomitable was thick, heavy. Every breath felt wrong, as if they were inhaling something that wasn't meant to exist. Zorth led the team deeper into the warship, plasma rifle steady in his grip. Every hallway felt twisted, not physically, but in a way that gnawed at the mind. It was subtle, like stepping into a room and forgetting why you had come in, like walking through a dream that was becoming a nightmare. They had lost 2 more soldiers along the way. One moment, they were marching in formation. The next? Gone. No screams, no gunfire, just erased. Sato had stopped calling their names after the second one. The remaining 6 moved cautiously, barely breathing. The ship's bridge was close. Zorth could see the reinforced door at the end of the corridor, its metal frame warped from battle. If there were any answers left, they would be inside. The whispering had not stopped. So close. We see you. You were never meant to return. Zorth ignored it. He had no choice. They reached the bridge doors. The access panel was dead, but Sato stepped forward, pulling an emergency override from his pack. He worked quickly, his fingers moving with precision, but Zorth could tell he was rattled. They all were. The shadows had tried to wear Elias Grant's face, tried to pretend. But the real question wasn't why. The real question was, had they succeeded? Sato exhaled sharply. We're in. The bridge doors groaned open, and they stepped inside. The bridge of the Indomitable was frozen in time. Every console was still active, their screens flickering with static-laced data. The captain's chair remained in place, perfectly aligned with the main viewport, which displayed the endless blackness beyond. And in the center of the bridge, slumped over the terminal, a body. The team raised their weapons instantly. It wasn't just any body. It was Elias Grant, or what was left of him. Zorth moved closer, his claws tightening around his rifle. Grant's uniform was torn, withered with age, but that wasn't possible. The Indomitable had vanished 2 years ago. His skin was gray, cracked like ancient stone, as if his body had been half preserved, caught between death and something else. And then, in the flickering glow of the consoles, he opened his eyes. Zorth didn't think. He fired. A plasma bolt ripped straight through the captain's skull, blowing apart bone and synthetic flesh. Grant's body lurched, convulsing violently before collapsing onto the terminal. Silence. Threx exhaled sharply. That wasn't him. Sato's voice was tight. It wasn't him anymore. Zorth swallowed hard. He had seen what the Erebus could do. They consumed, assimilated, wore the flesh of the fallen. This thing had not been Grant. It had been something trapped in his remains. Zorth forced himself to look away. "Pull the ship's logs. Now!" Sato nodded, moving toward the terminal. The system resisted at first, its interface lagging, glitching, but finally, a single log remained intact. The last recorded message from Captain Elias Grant. Sato activated it, and Grant's real voice filled the bridge. Log entry 00277, Captain Elias Grant, date unknown. If you're hearing this, it means someone found us. A ragged breath. Static interference. I don't know how much time I have left. Time doesn't work the same way here. We shouldn't be here. None of this should exist. More interference. The sound of metal groaning in the background. When the Excalibur warhead detonated, we didn't die. We didn't win. We broke something. We tore a hole in the universe, and now we're caught between what was and what comes next. A pause. I don't know if I'm still alive. I don't know if I'm already dead. The whispering in the ship grew louder. Zorth clenched his jaw. Grant's voice continued, weaker now. It's not just the Erebus. They were just the beginning, just a symptom of something much worse. A long, painful silence. And then, if you found this log, you need to run. Because if you can hear me, they can hear you too. The log ended, and the whispering stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. Sato stepped back from the terminal, his face pale. What the hell does that mean? Zorth didn't answer. His mind was racing. The Erebus had never been the real enemy. Something else had been waiting behind them. And when the Excalibur warhead detonated, they had let it through. A sharp, metallic click echoed through the bridge. Zorth turned, and Elias Grant was standing in the doorway. Perfect, untouched. His blue eyes locked onto them, and he smiled. I told you, I'm still here. I told you, I'm still here. The thing wearing Elias Grant's face stood in the doorway, motionless. Its expression was too perfect, too practiced, as if it was mimicking a smile rather than feeling it. Zorth's grip tightened on his rifle. The real Elias Grant was dead. They had just seen his decayed corpse slumped over the bridge console. So whatever was standing in front of them, it wasn't him. Threx snarled, raising his weapon. Burn it! They opened fire. Plasma rounds tore through the figure's chest, melting synthetic flesh and scorching the walls behind it. The force should have sent a normal body crumpling to the ground, but Grant didn't fall, didn't flinch, didn't even react. Instead, he kept smiling, and then he took a step forward. Sato's breath hitched. No! The thing's face split apart, not with blood, not with bone, with shadows. The skin peeled back like unraveling fabric, revealing something underneath, something shifting, its form flickering between 100 faces, 100 different versions of Elias Grant, overlapping and collapsing in on themselves. Not real, not a body, a thought given shape. And it wasn't alone. The whispering returned, but not just from Grant. From everywhere. Run! Let us in. You opened the door. The walls moved. The bulkheads of the Indomitable, the very metal of the ship shifted like liquid, forming half-shaped hands, twisting faces, mouths whispering in endless, distorted voices. They had never been alone. And then the lights died completely. Fall back! Back to the shuttle now! The team sprinted down the corridor, weapons firing wildly into the darkness. The Grant thing didn't chase them. It watched, its form warped, flickering in and out of existence like a mirage. They had never been meant to return here. The Indomitable wasn't a ship anymore. It was a wound, a scar in reality where something else had slipped through, and it wanted them to stay. Sato shouted through the comms. Sovereign Wrath, do you read? We need immediate extraction now. Static. No response. No connection to the fleet. Zorth's pulse hammered. The ship was trying to sever them from reality, to trap them here. Keep moving, he barked. They reached the hangar bay, the shuttle still intact. Threx practically threw himself into the pilot seat, slamming the thrusters online. Get in! Get in! Zorth took one last look toward the corridor. Grant was still there, standing at the threshold, watching. The ship shook violently, its structure warping, the walls breathing. And for the first time, Grant's smile faded. It's awake now. You led it back to them. Zorth's blood turned to ice. He lunged into the shuttle, slamming the hatch shut. The shuttle engines roared, the thrusters igniting as they launched from the Indomitable, hurtling toward open space. Behind them, the ship rippled, its form collapsing inward, distorting like a mirage. And then, it was gone. Not destroyed, not left in ruins, just erased, like it had never been there at all. The moment they crossed back into normal space, the Sovereign Wrath reappeared on their sensors. The comms crackled. Hi, Captain, what happened? You vanished from all systems. 1 second you were there, and then nothing. Zorth didn't respond immediately. He turned to Sato. The human's hands were trembling, his face pale. You saw it too, Zorth said quietly. Sato nodded. Grant was never there. Sato exhaled shakily. Number he wasn't. Whatever they had seen, whatever had worn his voice, it had never been Elias Grant. It had been something else, something waiting, something patient. Zorth took a slow, steady breath. Get us back to the fleet. Now. They had opened a door, and something had stepped through. The war was never about the Erebus. They were just the first infection. The real war? The real enemy? It had been watching the whole time. And now, it knew they had seen it too.